Hey, what's up? Welcome to the quick hitter version of Catch and Shoot 2.0. Along with Otto Strong, I'm Aaron Berlin. Our featured conversation this week is with the Suns television analyst and the Hall of Famer herself, Meyers Drysdale. We talked about Becky Hammon having a second interview with the Portland Trailblazers, and we asked the question, how close are we to having the first female head coach in the NBA? It was reported today that Becky Hammon, one of Pop's assistant coaches, she's been there, I think now 5 years, and she's been in the running for a couple of head coaching jobs over the last few years, that she's among the group or list of finalists. Do you think it happens this year where we get a female head coach in the NBA?
Aaron, it's going to happen. There's no question. Charles Barkley talked about it last night, too, on air. He said, how can you have 30 teams and only 7 black coaches? And when you're told, and Kenny Smith said, yeah, when you've got a Hall of Famer in Patrick Ewing, and he had an unbelievable career in New York, and then you're telling me that he can't be a head coach, he's got to sit on the bench for how many years and doesn't get the opportunity, but he's at Georgetown as a head coach now. So, you're looking at not only race, but you're looking at gender too. And it'll happen. It'll have to happen with a team that is got a general manager and an owner that is very, very supportive of a woman being in there. And if they do poorly, are you going to fire them right away? I mean, you may be going to a team that really isn't that strong. So are you going to give them a chance? But, I talked to several coaches in the league, and, if you don't get fired, doesn't mean you're not going to get hired again, and that's the nature of the game in the NBA. But in saying that, is Becky Hammon going to be the first? Is she, because that's what the media knows, because she was in San Antonio with Pop? Or is it going to be a Dawn Staley? Or is it going to be a Carol Lawson? Or is it going to be a Denny Busick, who's been in Dallas for a long time, too, under Rick Carlisle? So, there's a lot of women out there that are with NBA teams. And whether that GM and that owner can take what the media is going to say, they're going to be critical no matter what. It's just, it's how it is. And so that person has to be strong and accept what social media is so different today. And thank goodness when I had my tryout with the Pacers, because social media is just brutal.
Well, I was going to say, and part of my thought process was I was reading an article in The Athletic today that basically it's completely off topic to what we're talking about, but it was like how NFL teams design their plays, and a lot of coaches will look to the lower levels to implement things at the higher levels. And so to bring this back and to make sense of where I'm going with this, does this need to happen at the lower levels in the college ranks or maybe in secondary leagues before, if it doesn't happen this year for the NBA to do it, to take that step?
We've had some women that have coached in the G League and some of the men's leagues, lower leagues. And certainly we've seen that on the officials. I think we've got, 7 women officials now in the NBA? But you start in the G League, and you start in colleges, and you start in the WNBA, and to try and work yourself up to the NBA, which there are probably about a dozen NBA officials that started in the WNBA. And but in saying that, yes, it just, do you work your way up? Well, I think most of the women that have been in the situations that are being talked about, they have worked their way up. They've been coaching. And it's the same concept as what Kenny Smith said. What does it take for an athlete that has been a successful coach or a successful player to be named a coach? But again, it depends on the GM and the owner taking the chance and really believing in whoever that person is, whether it's an African American or whether it's a female. And it's going to be somebody that they've got to really believe in and promote. And no matter what the local media says. And that's the tough part, because the media today, and especially social media, but the media today, they can hire you and fire you and ruin your career.
And a couple of questions off of all of this. The first is, do you feel like, and you could just your personal opinion, do you feel like this will be kind of once there is one woman who becomes a head coach, like there'll be others within a short period of time? In other words, nobody wants to be the first. Is there any kind of sense or feeling like that? Or I don't know. Sometimes I've always felt that in my own life with respect to my own career at times, that, that once this happens, then, okay, then, we're obviously not going to be waiting 6 decades for the second one, clearly. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
You hope.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Because you can go back to the 80s and 90s that
Yeah.
when Pat Summitt was coaching
Right.
and Tara Vanderveer at Stanford, they were talked about, hey, let's bring them out to the men's team. Let's have them coach the men's team. They are that good a coach.
Right.
And so this is not a new thing with Becky Hammond and Carol Lawson and Dawn Staley and so many other women, Jenny Busick. But they have been coaching. They've been coaching a long time. Katie Smith, why not Katie Smith?
Right.
But I think that the fact that there have been women that have talked about, there have been women that have made that step, but it hasn't been talked about. I do believe that we're still in a holding pattern where whoever the first is, what's going to happen where they'll get fired. I was the first to have a tryout in the NBA, and I'm still the only woman to have a tryout in the NBA, and that was back in 1979. So to say that will there ever be a woman in the NBA? There's so many other variables. It's not just about the X's and O's. It's not just about, being able to coach. It's about your relationship and the trust that your players have in you, and that what coaches have, the trust that your assistants have. Nancy Lieberman was in Sacramento, and whether the trust was there by the head coach or not, I don't think that the relationship was great with the GM and so forth. So, things kind of, disintegrate a little bit. But is this going to be the first or the last? I don't think it'll be the last, but I don't know how long it will be until, again, an owner and a GM, which are usually white males, and we have a few black GMs like James Jones and Toronto, and there's a few others, but, are they going to hire somebody that they're familiar with and comfortable with, or are they going to go out on a limb again and start hiring women?
You also talked about the trust factor, and we know that the NBA players league, and so players often dictate what happens and who comes in and who stays. So you have a situation where the current players, so the younger players, the Devin Bookers, were basically babies in diapers when the WNBA formed, and so I guess where I'm going with this, I'm wondering if the younger players used to seeing the WNBA, used to seeing female professional athletes, as compared to, say, the older guard who those guys are probably retired, but just feeling that a younger player, that it wouldn't be as hard to get through those guys now as it might have been back in the 80s when you're talking about Pat Summitt. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, that's a great comment, and certainly having something exposed. And we all talk about, what happened this past summer with COVID and, Black Lives Matter. And so if we don't address Black Lives Matters or gay issues or abortion or transgender or so many other different issues that are going out there with police, so forth. So if those aren't brought up, then everything stays the same. Right. And as uncomfortable as conversations can be, you'd love to have a group of owners and general managers in a room, and have somebody like Charles, who would be perfect. Okay, how come there's not more African American coaches? Right to their faces. Right. And but I think sometimes when it's the first, a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, we tried it and it didn't work out, and so why do it again?" But it'll take, I think, a lot of people to believe in whoever that person is, again, whether it's gender or race or religion, whoever that person is, as far as, are you going to take another chance, not just on that person, but somebody that is qualified. So we know since Title IX that about 80% of the jobs in women's and girls' sports were coached by women. Since Title IX, less than 50% of the jobs are held by women. Well, why? Because men are applying to jobs and they know they're going to get paid, and they're taking the jobs away from women. Now, are women stepping up for those jobs? That's the other question. But to say that, why are all these men getting hired to coach women? And so we know that men are in the locker room on the women's side. So that was one of the big questions they asked me when I tried out with the Pacers. Where are you going to shower? But we've seen, if anybody's got any respect, you go into the locker room, which, again, there are lots of male coaches that have been coaching women, and there's a sense of understanding what, proper etiquette is. And but the thing is, as far as another woman being hired right away, whether another team is willing to go out there and go after somebody that they feel is qualified over a male. Sometimes they're going to do something that's more comfortable for them.
If you'd like to hear more from Ann Meyers Drysdale, check out the full version of Catch and Shoot 2.0 from Pure Hoops Media. You can also see the video version of the Catch and Shoot Quick Hitter on the Pure Hoops Media YouTube channel.